if you're giving of yourself, just like you are with your podcast or whatever, trying to help people, at some point, you'll start to catch some momentum. And it may not be in that business that you started. And that's kind of the hard part too. I think if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, is if you start something, you've worked really hard on it, but then you find out that maybe that's not something that serves the bigger why, and it's not good for you for whatever reason. Well, that's the difficult piece of owning a business, which I've had to go through and be like, well, that's not for me. And I have to shut that off, even though I've put a lot of work into it and it is making a lot of money. It just isn't serving the bigger why.
You are now listening to the podcast where authors inspire listeners to become authors, the Going North Podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer, best-selling author, and book enthusiast, Dom Brightman. And you're going to be listening to a different author that will inspire you to join the business of immortality, known as authorship. Now let the fun begin. Today's episode is sponsored by both books, Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, and the follow-up bestseller, Stay the Course, The Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. Head over to Amazon.com, pick up both books. They are available in a trifecta of paperback, audio, and ebook. Cop all three of both and be on the lookout for another book from yours truly to help podcasters succeed. Now let's get on with today's episode. And today on the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, known as GMP, the Great, Glorious, and Glamorous, we got another super special, awesome human for you today, courtesy of one of the best websites on planet Earth right now, known as podmatch.com. That's right indeed, podmatch.com, the wonderful site where podcast guests get to connect with podcast hosts, and if they're cool, they're freaking in. And today's guest is cooler than 2 cucumbers indeed. That's right indeed, because we got a fighter pilot, baby. That's right indeed, a combat veteran, y'all. So my goodness, so we got another wonderful veteran who served the wonderful country of the good old #1 US baby. That's right indeed, because he's also a wonderful father, a husband, as well as a serial entrepreneur, as well as an instructor pilot, and two-time best-selling author on Amazon for his wonderful books indeed. And what's even better and not butter is that we both share the first name. So let's give it up for the samurai himself, the one, the only, Dominic Teich. How you doing today, Dom?
Thanks for the intro, Dom. I don't think I've had a podcast yet with a host that has my name.
That's right indeed. My man's definitely getting those flyer miles in. You finally found one. It's like, oh, yeah, I found a guy in the mirror who looks just like me by first name.
Yeah, I appreciate the ability to reschedule with the life that comes up.
Oh, heck yeah, man. True. Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, my man went to the Caramel Lucas School of dodging the host from his corn. He was like, this guy's corny. I got to make a run for it. I got to prepare my mind for this one. Crap. Yesterday's interview, he said something crazy about a random squirrel. All right, I got to reschedule this.
Not so much.
Oh, man. But hey, as with all introductions, they're not allowed to be 28 days, 0.75 years long. And I probably only covered, I don't know, 2 days of content. So mind filling in any cavities I may have missed about you, my man, that made you the Dom that you are today.
Yeah, I think the big one is a lot of people know me from my fighter pilot background, but even more important to me is my Christian faith. And I'm a dad. I got four beautiful children and a wonderful wife that is a lot of the, you could probably attest to this. You've seen it before, but a lot of someone's success comes from the people standing behind them and giving them their support. And that's an understatement for my wife and what she's been able to do for our family and through the years of, as you can imagine, starting businesses while doing the full-time fighter pilot, instructor pilot lifestyle is not an easy thing, but man, it's been a cool journey, and she's been there along the way with me and for me, and man, it has made it all the difference in the world.
Heck yeah, indeed. Heck yeah, indeed. Yep. Definitely takes one heck of a woman to be able to stick by you and help you to make you better than what you are, man, to discover that wonderful Michelangelo behind, or should I say that wonderful David statue behind the Marvel? I was going for alliteration. I was like, hey, wait a second. Michelangelo didn't find himself a marble. That was David.
Yeah, nice.
Yes, it did. 'Cause that's huge, man. Like freaking four kids, then the husband wife thing, and then yeah, I'm assuming still in the military at the time, still in the Air Force while starting multiple businesses. So yeah, that's definitely a tall order.
Yeah. Just being organized and scheduling things, and then more importantly, just I think the busy individual like everybody is nowadays, just the communication piece too, which was just something that you learn through the school of hard knocks as you're starting out. Just making sure everybody knows and
Heck
can
yeah,
get on
indeed.
board, and yeah, and keep the lanes of communication open there. I think that's been one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. So, alleged to become a fighter pilot, my man did just have a dream that, hey, once I decide to walk, I'm going to jump on a plane and fly all over the world and maybe shoot down a couple random objects in the sky. Sadly, humans.
um, I think there's probably quite a few fighter pilots that grew up wanting to be a fighter pilot, or at least that's the stories that I see. Every once in a while, I'll meet somebody that kind of and then found themselves in a fighter jet. But I'd say, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but by and large, most of the in our community and in our line of work, it was a dream because it's not something that it's not instant gratification. As a little kid, I either wanted to play Major League Baseball or fly fighter jets. I was playing quite a bit of ball up through junior college, and I started flying at the same time. And when I started flying, that started to take off, and I really got the bug. And then when I found out that, and the other piece of it too is I can play baseball, it's a lot of fun, but let's say I only get to, single A or triple A ball, well, I'm still going to be eating bean burritos and driving my little rattle trap car around that starts about 50% of the time. So I probably need to do something that makes a little bit of money, has a little bit higher potential for where I thought I was going to be going. And so that's I kind of shifted gears and put all my effort into flying. And I was actually a civilian flight instructor for a number of years before I joined the military, which is kind of where it all started. I don't know if I really ever gave myself that chance early on to believe that I could be a fighter pilot, just because there's not a whole lot of military people in my family. I wasn't surrounded by that, so I didn't really know how to do that. So I figured the best way to start was just to get out there and start flying airplanes and see where it went from there.
That's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's right, indeed. From bean burritos to best-selling books, you'll love to see it. Especially,
Oh man,
and
I have never heard that before, but I'm gonna steal that. Oh man,
hey, go ahead and fly away with it, right?
yeah, yeah. Oh man,
So my goodness, man. So being able to be a civilian flight instructor, then become a fighter pilot for the good old US of A, man. Like, dude, like how was that transition to like entrepreneur? Actually, better yet, what was the actually backtracking a bit to transition from, I guess, from civilian instructor to actually fighter pilot? Because I'm pretty sure things like you had that baseline, but I'm pretty sure there might have been some habits you might have had to adjust, maybe.
yeah. I think the biggest thing that I learned for the first probably handful of years in my military service is that on the civilian side, what I found and what worked for so many years going through college was, study hard, do well on your tests, turn in your homework, all of the standard stuff that gets you through college. But that's very singular. A lot of times college I find is not really yeah, there are some group activities, but I didn't really learn that in college. I just was diligent and turned my homework in. And then even as a civilian pilot, I was as very much the training that I was paying for at the time was very much about me. So as long as I studied hard and and got in the airplane and performed and flew well, still really not, granted, there's another pilot in the airplane at that time that I had to work with. And, there's a little bit of teamwork, but unfortunately that was kind of something that I learned that worked for me on the civilian side when I went in the military. It wasn't necessarily that I wasn't a team player, but if it was up to me studying for a test or making sure that, kind of selfishly my stuff was squared away, I would rationalize that to myself and make that kind of my focus, versus there were a lot of missed instances where I could have helped others. And I did start learning that stuff, but I think that was kind of one of the biggest transitions from just civilian college to civilian flying, is learning those group dynamics and working as a team, which is very much what fighter pilots do. I mean, we very rarely fly a single fighter jet into war or even in training sorties. We're at least with one other airplane, if not multiple other airplanes. So I think it's those lessons kind of came through time and the school of hard knocks. But yeah, it kind of built me into somebody today. And it's kind of, there's a couple of painful memories that I can look back on and be like, well, I could have maybe had a little bit more fun during this time, and I could have been a better person doing this. But it's part of the beast, and you learn from it and move on.
I hear you, man. That's right indeed. Actually, isn't that how you got your nickname Slice?
Yeah, I mean, that was, I was as a young fighter pilot, I actually broke a training rule, and I pointed at another aircraft for too long while I was shooting simulated missiles, and we had a really close pass. Could have ended a lot worse than it did, and they said I tried to slice my instructor in half. So I'd been called a lot of other names up to that point that were a lot worse. So I'm grateful to have the call sign Slice now.
I can definitely imagine with the military. Oh
Yeah,
man, that's right indeed. Glad you're still here indeed. Glad the instructor's still here too.
yeah, me too.
I guess you got a good showing out that day.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, less of a, the instructor was very good. He ended up going on to be like a Top Gun weapon school instructor too. So he was a good instructor, and he didn't really chew me out. We just kind of, he had a really good way of kind of explaining what happened. And that's part of this training, that's part of this life, is there's going to be some stuff that's pretty doggone dangerous. But that's why we train to be the best in the world, and you're going to make mistakes. And he fessed up to it, and he actually briefed the whole squadron on what had happened during that instance, and so everybody got to learn from it.
Woohoo! That's what I'm talking about indeed. Instructor swag indeed. That's right indeed. Real life lesson right there indeed. It's like, hey, learning right there on the job and training. So that way, if you screw up training, you'll actually be better suited when the real thing happens. That's right indeed.
Yep.
And also, if I'm not mistaken, I was actually during your time in Japan, no less, too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep, in a squadron that our mascot was a samurai, so the slice, uh, you know, n- the ninja sword type motif went well with that.
Ah, that's what I'm talking about indeed. That's what I'm talking about indeed. So, any favorite memories from Japan or any of the other countries that you visited?
Japan is having been fortunate enough to travel quite a bit and see other cultures and countries, and even see the Middle East. And just thinking back to Japan, just so different from Western society and what we're used to. Big cars, big roads, everything's big and loud, and sports teams, and then to go into that society as an American, as a representative of America. And just, it is, I think, of all the countries I've been to around the world, Japan was the most unique, in the sense that it's so different than I could have even imagined as an American. There's so few people that speak English. I think, don't quote me on this, I think there are three different Japanese alphabets. So when I tried to start learning some of the basic phrases in Japanese, that was even, challenging. But I'll never forget, like, one of my favorite memories is I walked into a gas station style store, And unlike America, well, like America, they do have junk food that you can buy there, but unlike America, you can get sushi and there's some pretty healthy alternatives. And so I asked the Japanese woman behind the counter, I wanted something with tuna, and I had a little app on my smartphone that did some translations for me, and I was going through each one of the different alphabets or dialects or whatever you want to call it. And so I phrased the sentence structure kind of like Yoda talks. So I just said, like, I want a tuna roll, but tuna roll I want. So I would speak into the app, and it looked ridiculous, right? Because I'm talking to this little Japanese lady, and I'm like trying to speak like Yoda, not having any idea if that's how their sentence structure actually works. And so I'm speaking into this app, and then I'm then playing in some Japanese like dialect, or I'm even butchering it right now, but I'm playing it to her, and she just looks at me and she breathes through her molars and she shakes her head no. And then I was like, oh great, this is going really well. And so then I try the next alphabet and the next application I have, and she's still confused and doesn't know. And I was like, well, this is probably a lost cause. I'll just grab something off the shelf, and it might actually surprise me. It may taste disgusting. It could be the best thing I ever have. So then I spoke into the last application that I had, and her eyes lit up, and she goes, the word hi. I don't know if it's spelled HI, but that's essentially them saying yes. So she like kind of got excited and she was yelling hi, and then she runs in the back, and I was so confused. I thought to myself, well, did I? She clearly was happy, but then she ran away. So is she getting something? And she comes back out with this little seaweed paper wrapped tuna thing that was actually really really good. Tasted really good. So my efforts to try to speak in whatever broken Japanese dialect had worked and paid off. And then I actually started learning from that, and it's just funny talking in a language that's so different from English or Spanish or French. It's those you can kind of pick the words out, but the Japanese language was something that I never grasped. But I just used those little applications, and it kind of served me well during my time over there.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. For a second there, I almost thought it was gonna be like the Rush Hour 2 situation where they brought out the dude brought out the dog like, "Yes, you've come to marry your daughter finally."
Well, another time I was not paying attention, and I was driving down a street, and I bought one of those little Subaru WRX STI version cars. So it was a right-hand drive little rocket. And so I'm driving down the street, and it looks like a one of those arms that comes down to prevent you from driving a train track, but there was no train tracks around. This arm falls into the street, and I stop and I look to my left, and there's two Japanese police officers, and they had set up their own little makeshift site to basically pull people over if you were speeding. So they were gunning people and checking people's speed, and it just was so funny that in the middle of the road there's an arm dropped that essentially was like, you need to stop and talk to us. And of course you can imagine how that conversation went based on our previous talk about how I have no idea how to talk in any Japanese, and they didn't have any idea how to talk in English. So that was a fun interaction as well. It ended amicably.
Sweet. So glad it did. Glad it did indeed. Glad it didn't turn into a hey, we're filming season 2 of Squid Games. We need somebody to get in there for real.
They trap me, throw me in the back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Man, but hey, it's all good. It's all good, and definitely great experience and great stories too. And I really just stepping out and really just trying everything that'll work until something actually works. And I'm pretty sure that paid off with your entrepreneurial pursuits. So I guess coaching and real estate are your two businesses at the moment, or is there more that are
Yeah, so
probably
there's
G14 classified?
yeah. There was we I stopped, or I shut off another business that was profitable, but it was just about money, and the why wasn't there for me. So we were you know buying and selling stuff, obviously, as a lot of businesses do. But so that business has gone away. And it's funny you bring this up, Dom, because I've been trying to define, with single seat mindset, that business. We've written books with some other fighter pilot authors. We are essentially giving people fighter pilot techniques and the things that we learn in in our training, and we apply them to other aspects of life. So I don't. Yes, I guess I'm a coach in a way because I'm an instructor pilot and I can coach people, but in regards to like having a funnel where we funnel the people down through the business to give them coaching, it's something that I haven't thought about until you just mentioned it, but it's not really a coaching business. It is a business, a for-profit business, but we actually give all the money from Single Seat Mindset and all of the books and even the authors that contribute money and people that donate, all that money goes to a children's cancer nonprofit. It's a pretty big why for us, and it's been really cool to see that grow. The other side of that, the other business that I own is like you had mentioned, we buy multifamily properties that are fairly distressed, and we renovate them, and then we just rent them out, and they're like little mini apartment buildings that we buy and hold on to. And that's been fun. It's been a lot of work and a lot of learning there. But I will say, to kind of answer your question, is that I have used a lot of the stuff that I learned as a fighter pilot and applied it directly to being an entrepreneur and growing the business. And it's funny, as I'm flipping through Single Seat Wisdom Volume 1, and one of the chapters in there is written by my friend. Her call sign is Smokin', but she wrote a chapter called Stubborn Grit. And I remember reading her story. So for those that don't know, the Single Seat Wisdom series books, we've got 2 of them at the time of this recording. We got 2 published, but there's 20 chapters, each written by a different fighter pilot. And it's not necessarily a book you need to commit your life to. You just read a chapter in 10 minutes or so, and then set it aside and kind of digest, what you maybe learned. But I remember reading Smokin's chapter when she sent it to me, and I just thought, wow, that's so true for a lot of us, is that she was just told her whole life, maybe you can't do that, or you're not tall enough, or X, Y, and Z. And she ends up going to the Air Force Academy. She was a collegiate gymnast, and then ends up being an instructor pilot and finds herself in a fighter pilot. And then her husband Hash actually wrote a chapter in Single Seat Wisdom Volume 2. Then she married a fighter pilot. So I mean, her story is pretty cool, but the idea behind it is just being stubborn when and just kind of gritting through a lot of that stuff, which is kind of what I found was a good character trait to have if you wanted to be a fighter pilot, or if you want to be an entrepreneur and start a business. It's going to take some grit, and it's going to take some drive and some time to get there. This isn't like posting something on Instagram or whatever the social media is nowadays. It does take some time. I can imagine even with your podcast that you have, there's been some times where it probably wasn't too fun. Dom, am I kind of speaking your language with that comment?
Yes, you are.
But now that it's up and running, right, it's kind of the analogy that somebody mentioned to me early on as I was starting out, it's kind of like a flywheel, right? It's big, it's heavy, but you can get it as you start moving it. You start figuring out your processes, the people that should be involved, and just everything that goes on in a business. And it's, even if the business is alike, there's a lot of similar things that go on in a lot of businesses. However, there's going to be your own challenges. Your challenge might be yourself. So something that I talk about that I had to do early on in my real estate business was literally fire myself from jobs that I was doing. One, because there was somebody that could do it better than me, and I had to admit that, and pridefully step aside and go, okay, I need to exercise a little humility here. Somebody's better at this than I am. But firing yourself from certain jobs that somebody else can do, that you can pay them to do, and kind of accelerate your business in the direction that you're trying to go. Some of those things I learned as a fighter pilot, and then just applied them directly to the business itself. And that's what these books are for. There's a lot of people read them and they're like, well, is it just for pilots? And that it couldn't be further from the truth. It's very applicable to all walks of life. I have gotten a lot of good feedback from business owners and entrepreneurs that really like the short, punchy, anecdotal stories that are applied to to whatever you're working on in your life.
Heck yeah, man. That's what I'm talking about indeed. Because hey, definitely can be applied indeed. Because yeah, especially that grit indeed. Because hey, it ain't just for the grits in the pot, y'all. It ain't just how many grits, y'all. I'm talking about the real stubborn grit. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Where you have to realize, you know what? This ain't working yet, but it's gonna work one of these days. That's right indeed. And then maybe adjust a thing or two, and boom, you're finally on the other side. And you can smell the grass. That's right indeed.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Heck, even maybe smell the air.
Yeah.
As long as it's the good air.
Every once in a while, you'll get get big old puff of fighter jet exhaust, the JP8 jet fuel that's been burned, and I'm sure that it's not good for your lungs, but there is something about that smell that kind of just keeps you going as a fighter pilot.
There you go. It's air in your chest, I imagine.
Yeah.
So, my goodness, man, since you're a fellow Christian, my man, always invite fellow believers to share the salvation testimony on the show, man. So, how'd you come to know Christ, my man?
So, I was raised in that, but as I grew up and I went through college, as I started going through college, our higher education institutions, especially in the US, are not geared to talk about religion or spirituality or Christian faith. And there's a bunch of different reasons for that. But I kind of fell away from leading a Christian life for many years, and it didn't work. I went through a phase of rebellion, and I just went through all these different phases for whatever reason, right? And I rationalized it in my own mind. But at the end of the day, after a pretty big mental crash 5 or 6 years ago, as I started to get back on my feet and figure out what's going on in my mind, I had a reversion back to the Christian faith in 2020. And so many things that I can't even explain changed in my life when it was when my business decisions, when the reason behind we were doing things, and I had to explain, like, I owned another business, but we decided to turn that business off just because it was the why wasn't there. And that why is why am I doing this? And for instance, like single seat mindset, that business, the why is pretty big for us because not only are we trying to help other people with using tactics and techniques and strategies that fighter pilots use to apply them to their daily life, their business, their entrepreneurship, but it's also we're giving all the money to a children's cancer nonprofit. So for all that to say, when I did have my call it a reversion back to the Christian faith, there were a lot of really, really cool things that happened. And I was one of those classic people that thought that the Bible was outdated and old and it didn't apply to my life. And so in my stubborn pride, I remember talking to my wife and I said, "Hey, I'm going to prove this wrong." And I'm sure I'm the first one that's ever said that, right, Dom? But I went through a couple years of Bible studies and really started learning what it was all about. And holy smokes, is it applicable to our life in this day and age? Absolutely, 100%. And it has literally changed my life. Now, granted, I'm still recovering just like anybody, and it's a fight every single day. But that rooting business decisions, how you vote, how you raise your family, how you interact with your friends and your groups, that has been one of if not the biggest thing that has positively impacted my business, my life, and everything. And when I find that things start to kind of teeter and maybe not fall apart, but I get that feeling again. It's like, well, I haven't been and doing that stuff enough, and I need to get back into that and establish those habit patterns to make sure that I'm staying on track.
Heck yeah, man, indeed. And it's actually interesting too, because like that's probably one of the major things you hear about the Bible itself. Folks be thinking, "Oh yeah, this thing it's an ancient book. It has nothing to do with anything today." Then you go deeper into it, read the Proverbs for that wisdom. It's like, hey, this thing is freaking still applicable. Like this thing makes total sense. Then if you do some good old history with it, it's like, oh, I guess we're going through the whole circle of life again with certain
Yeah.
parts of the globe. It's like, dude, this thing is more applicable today than it's been freaking ever. It's really hilarious at times when you actually go into the book, it's like, oh man, wow. It's like, no wonder this book gets a lot of flack because it's right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And if you read the Old Testament without I think that was one of the big problems, Dom, is that if you just sit down and read it, it's such a the story behind it is so dense and it's so multifaceted, whether that's geographically faceted, just understanding that, the Old Testament is very, I think the word is monarchical, right? So there's just a king, and that's very different from how Americans live their lives. Men were in charge, which nowadays we call that chauvinism. There's all of these things that, as long as you understand the time that they were in, you can then pluck out the lesson. But then to just see, as you move into the New Testament, how you know, Jesus came around and shook things up, obviously, and he made it a lot better. And it's very applicable to everybody. He just kind of said, hey, let's, he's call him the biggest liberal that ever walked the face of the earth. He's just, he wants everybody to be their friends, but then at the same time he's like, well, there are some rules that work, and there are some things that don't work, and here they are. And then, well, it's your choice. This isn't a cult. You get to pick if you want to be in this group or not. And man, it has, like I said, I'm just thinking through all the different business and life decisions that I've made, and how that has really, really changed my life for the better.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Heck, any words of inspiration for the Christian business owners out there?
Yes. So another one of our chapter authors, Hack, her quote as she starts her chapter, it says, "Be who God meant you to be, and you'll set the world on fire." And I think it was Saint Catherine of Siena that said that. And the idea behind that, or at least the message that I get from that, is if you're a bigger version of yourself because you have God next to your side, you won't literally hopefully not set the world on fire like a pyro, but like your business is going to take off like a rocket ship. And I pointed to that. When we wrote this first single seat wisdom book, it was just a hobby. I wanted to get we started writing it during COVID when everybody was locked down, so we wanted to start sharing in some way, even though everybody was going through what they were going through. And so when I wrote it, it was literally the worst hobby that I ever started, because one, it was a lot of work. It's it's pretty expensive to publish books. I didn't know that I kind of knew that because I had published another book prior to that for my other business. So it's expensive, it's a lot of work. And then I think, just the re-looking at what we were doing with the business, and then early on deciding that we were just going to give 100% of the proceeds away, that really helped us align what we were doing and why we were doing it. And the reason being is it's not for money. And it was for a lot of reasons, but a big one is for me, is I can now go at this, this is a for-profit business, but the more money we make, the more money we get to give away. And there's I think it was Tony Robbins. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure Tony Robbins said something along the lines of, you don't give in order to get, you give just to give, but you then start to get, you get a lot more in return. But if you start out with, I'm just going to start giving so that I can get more, well, that's the wrong way to start out. Your why is going to be all jacked up. But if you're giving of yourself, just like you are with your podcast or whatever, trying to help people, at some point, you'll start to catch some momentum. And it may not be in that business that you started. And that's kind of the hard part too. I think if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, is if you start something, you've worked really hard on it, but then you find out that maybe that's not something that serves the bigger why, and it's not good for you for whatever reason. Well, that's the difficult piece of owning a business, which I've had to go through and be like, well, that's not for me. And I have to shut that off, even though I've put a lot of work into it and it is making a lot of money. It just isn't serving the bigger why.
Heck yeah, man. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Definitely got to serve that bigger why. And out of curiosity, was there a personal reason why you chose that children's hospital for all the proceeds to go to? Because, yeah, like cancer's huge, but was there like a catalyst for that made you choose that?
Yeah. So the Anna Schindler Foundation, they it's essentially kind of like the Ronald McDonald setup, where the family, they build homes in the Pacific Northwest, so in Spokane, Washington, and families that have children that are going through cancer treatments have a place to stay. And then even more than that, Anna, who the foundation was named after, she was actually my cousin. So my aunt and uncle started this foundation, and it's, they've been chipping away at it for I think 11 or 12 years at this point. So that, yeah, there is a very strong family tie to that foundation, but then also just seeing actions speak louder than words, just to see what they have done with that, and just building the real estate and seeing the homes that these families get to stay in for free through contributions from people that are just donating to it, right? 501c nonprofit, they get to give that money back, and give. And what ended up happening, and one of the main reasons they started that foundation, my aunt and uncle, was they had to stay in the hospital while Anna was going through her treatments. And as you could probably imagine, the hospital is a pretty terrible place to camp out and live. It's not very
Oh,
peaceful.
yeah.
There's lots of beeps and squeaks and noises and lights. And so that was part of the reason they started this. And now families, when they do get thrust into this life altering situation of finding out one of their kids has cancer, they can escape essentially back to a very comfortable home. And another thing too is that a lot of these hospitals, they do have homes that these families can stay in. But if you've got, I don't remember how many kids, but if you've got a larger family, it's very difficult to find somebody that's going to, house a larger family, and their homes do that. And they're always full. I mean, I was talking to my aunt a couple months ago. She said that there is never any vacancy. There's always somebody that needs a place to stay while they're going through that.
That's definitely huge right there. Definitely huge indeed. So, if anyone finds it in the heart, go ahead and contribute indeed. Good news is the books too, like all the business from single seat mindset, it all goes to that wonderful foundation, helping out those families indeed. Because, yeah, like cancer's a huge monster that needs to be purged for good. Definitely purged for good indeed. Definitely folks who need that wonderful place to stay while that is going on, because that's definitely a rough one indeed. So, my goodness, my man. So, since you've been on a boatload of interviews on the guest side of the microphone, is there a question that you wish folks would ask you more often?
I think one of the questions that a lot of people have been asking recently is what is something that I can do as a business owner or entrepreneur, that I can start today, and I think, because a lot of people go, let's get down to brass tacks. What can I start doing? Well, one thing that helped me, and that I think everyone should consider, is starting your morning out on the right foot. And what I tried to do initially was spend 30 minutes getting my mind right in the morning, whether that was prayer, reading, kind of focusing on the day. But 30 minutes seemed to be too much to just sit, especially if you're an action oriented person like I am. So I spend at least 5 minutes every morning just sitting there, not looking at my phone, not looking at the news, God forbid, because that's like just poisoning your mind at the outset of the day. But just kind of going, what am I going to do today? And I think that's something that a lot of people need to do, are these little habits, these blocking and tackling style habits that lead to bigger things. And that's where a lot of things started changing for me, was getting up earlier in the morning. If your life and your whatever you're doing can allow that, even if it's 15 to 30 minutes early in the morning, just get up a little bit earlier, and in that sacred time in the morning, just focusing on, at the end of the day, if I look back, what makes today better than it was yesterday. And so I call it, I just spend 5 minutes in the morning, whether that's laying in bed or sitting down, just kind of closing my eyes and going, where am I going today? I spend that 5 minutes, and you'll be amazed that simple little habit will start to lead to other positive habits. A lot of times I think you'll find out that maybe what you're doing, the things that you need to stop doing, are more impactful in your life than the things that you need to start doing. But if you want to start something that's very simple, it's actionable, you can start it even right now or tomorrow morning. Is when you start your day, just go, hey, I want some functionality to this day, or I just need to focus on one thing that at the end of this day I can debrief myself and say, yep, today was a success because of X, Y, and Z, or hey, I should have done this better and I can do it better next time type of thing.
Woohoo! That's what I'm talking about indeed. And I noticed a lot of folks who are high performers, peak performers, they do have that wonderful habit where they just go ahead and check in with themselves before they check in on the world. And they say, really definitely need, especially if you're like one of those early risers and you might be a little groggy or whatever, and you got all this energy. It's like, hey, time to sit myself down, be still, get the stillness going, and plan for the day ahead, and then probably have that debrief at the end of the day. Indeed, that's right. Indeed, that's right. Indeed, and if I'm not mistaken, that's actually part of your wonderful PED plan. Is that in one of your books as well with the single seat wisdom?
Yeah, plan, execute, debrief. So yeah, the 5 minutes in the morning is a good way, and if you want a construct for that, you can build a plan, and then that way, as you go through your day, you can execute that plan. And at the end of the day, you can debrief. You can do that in a much larger scale, right? As well for a business, like, hey, what's the plan for the business as I'm executing it? You need to be asking yourself, is this luck? Is it working? Do I need to tweak my plan? And the way that you do that is you have to be brutally honest with yourself and debrief yourself appropriately when things go wrong, especially if it was your fault, which many times as a business owner, it's going to be your fault. So just kind of putting your pride behind you and debriefing yourself appropriately and then going back and tweaking your plan again. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That was actually a chapter written by a Top Gun weapons officer, and he's also an astronaut and a test pilot. Correction, he's a test pilot and an astronaut. I don't think he was a weapons officer, but either way, Box Johnson, big brains astronaut guy, wrote a chapter about plan, execute, and debrief. You can find that in Single Seat Wisdom Volume 2.
That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's what I'm talking about indeed. Well, speaking of single seat wisdom, volumes 1 and 2, since it's a whole series, if both of those books were a food, what would they be and why?
A food. Oh man, I would say that I've actually never been asked that question before, so I appreciate that. Man, Single Seat Wisdom Volume 1. So the title is called Practical and Valuable Life Advice from America's Fighter Pilots. I would say that it is for food, Volume 1, just like an actual food category, like protein, or like an actual, like a Cliff Bar or a steak, or what you want me to like drill down, and how far do you want me
Yeah,
to go with
man.
this, Dom?
Yeah, man. Go ahead and drill down, bro.
I would say that these books are more like an energy bar. And the reason they're like an energy bar is that energy bars, you can carry them with you and they're easy to consume and they give you a little jolt of energy, or they should. And that's what these books are designed for, is for the busy individual. And you don't have to be a business owner or entrepreneur. You could be a sports player, you could be a doctor, an attorney, somebody that is busy, got stuff going on in your life. You don't have time to commit to multiple hours a day reading a book. And these chapters are designed to be 800 to no more than about 1,600 words long, with a short, impactful message at the end of them to give you that jolt of energy, just kind of like a power bar or an energy bar through your day.
Woohoo! That's right indeed. And for those who's driving, this is some good single seat wisdom for you indeed. That's right indeed. Especially if you ain't got no passengers. Like, yeah, it's definitely some single seat wisdom indeed. Get that power bar swag going. That's right indeed. Might be your own Cliff Bar. Might be your best bar ever before they got bought out, where it tasted extra good. That's right indeed. All that.
Oh man, Cliff Bar. Never thought I'd equate books to an energy bar, but we just did it.
Heck yeah. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. You've already now entered in the side effects of one of this podcast, or should I say one of the side effects of guesting on this podcast. You may become hungry.
Oh man.
Oh
That's great.
man. Well, we're coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive. And that is, if you'll wake up tomorrow and you were 25 again, but you're still in the current year, what advice would you give to yourself?
I would start every day and spend at least 5 minutes thinking about that day, just to get my mindset on the right path. And the reason being, at that age, I timed everything. So I would get up, and as soon as my feet hit the ground, I would just be sprinting through my day, which there's a lot of there's a lot of good that can come out of that. But the problem is that if you never take the time to ask yourself, is this where I need to be going? Then are you really on the right path? And there was a lot of paths that I probably could have avoided. I learned a lot from, but I could have gotten to the same result, had a lot more fun, and spent a lot less energy working in the wrong direction, only to figure that out later on. So I think the 25-year-old me, I needed to just, slow my roll in the morning and spend a little bit more time going, okay, what am I doing today? What am I doing with my week? What am I doing with my month and my year? And I think I would have gotten a lot more done with a lot less thrash. I was one of those classic high achievers, lots of busyness, but I found as I get a little bit older and learn from my mistakes that it's not the right business, to just be busy, busy, busy all the time. You've got to let yourself decompress and kind of ask yourself, where do I need to be going today specifically?
There you go. That's right indeed. My man was Sonic the Hedgehog at one point then. That's right indeed.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Just blitzing through the day, like, all right, let's time everything. All right, cool. That's right indeed. All
Yeah,
right, so the commute took how many minutes? Oh shoot, it took freaking 30. Let's see if I can get
you're
to
nailing it
28.
right now. I would do that. That would be me. And then I would say, okay, what time do I need to get up so that I can spend the least amount of time messing around and get to where I'm going?
Heck yeah, indeed. That's right indeed. Hey, that, I mean, it ain't the way to live for a long time, but hey, you probably got a lot of crap done though. Measuring yourself like that.
Yeah, but then you think about it, a lot of times I was just pretty, it leads to these I think the analogy that I have is kind of like the Federal Reserve. It leads to these boom bust cycles where you get a lot done, but then you end up burnt out. And so I think that's kind of the big thing that it prevents is it prevents those phases of burnout, because if you're being intentional with what you're thinking about at the beginning of it each day, you can literally tell yourself, which I do all the time, I'm not going to do that activity anymore, or that sounds like a good idea, but I'm not going to do it because it doesn't serve the bigger why. But without that sacred time in the morning to kind of get your mind right and make sure you're going in the right direction, how would you know that?
That's what I'm talking about indeed. Who knows? That might be the episode for this episode title. Serve the bigger why, y'all. That's right indeed. Serve the bigger why indeed. That's right indeed. You got to figure out what the heck it is. Serve it. That's right indeed. Is it spiritual, the almighty? Is it something deeper but also philanthropic? Like, hey, like helping out folks who sadly have children with cancer, like helping them to really deal with the situation a lot better than what it originally would have been. Like just finding that bigger why indeed. That's right indeed. It's got to be bigger than freaking India and China combined, y'all. That's right indeed. Bigger than all of Asia. That means it's going to be really big.
uh,
Well, speaking of the bigger why, I know one way to help folks probably get there is through your content and keeping up with what you're doing, man. So, what's the best way for folks to keep up with you and all the stuff that you're doing, my man?
yeah, so we've designed singleseatmindset.com to be kind of the launch pad for everything we got going on. So that's where we've been sending people. You can get in direct contact with me there if you have questions, or if you want to reach out. I love the emails that we get from people just saying, hey man, I have a niece or nephew that's starting pilot training, or somebody that started a business, or this is very applicable to X, Y, and Z. Singleseatmindset.com it's the launch pad. It's the runway for afterburner results, if you will. And then for your audience, if they've made it this far in the episode, we also have a gift for podcast listeners. So if you go to singleseatmindset.com/podcast gift, all lowercase, all one word, the first 3 podcast listeners go to that and sign up. Send out a signed copy of Single Seat Wisdom Volume 1 for free. So we ship out a hard copy of the book, and that's for people that live in the US. If you live overseas, just reach out to me and we'll figure out how to get you one of these books one way or another. but mostly for the people that live in the U.S., the U.S.-based podcasts, we like to send out an actual physical copy, a little gift, if you will. So singleseatmindset.com/podcast gift. That's where you're going to find the goodness.
Woohoo! And that's the good stuff about waiting until the end, because you never know. The guests bring gifts. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Authors got gifts. Might make you do tricks. You never know. That's right, indeed. That's right. Yes, indeed. Well, you heard that right, folks. Going to put a link to all those wonderful things in the show notes, indeed. Snag the gift. That's right, indeed. Have Christmas come to your house early, indeed. Have it fly to your house, indeed. That's right, indeed. Because reindeers, they just glide. But hey, this book is going to fly. That's right. But before that rabbit hole gets any deeper, any parting words before we close up shop, Dom?
Hey, Dom, I appreciate what you're doing. Thanks for having me on your show. Thanks for letting me reschedule, and thanks for letting me clarify my why a little bit more during this talk. I really appreciate you.
If you're hearing this part of the episode, that means you're one cool individual. Thanks a bunch for tuning in, and if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to share it with at least one other person in your network. Bonus points for 3. And be sure to check out the backlog too while you're at it, because there are hundreds of wonderful episodes to choose from as well.